2:30. Sure, they're here, and the waitress goes, don't you have anything new? It's like 6 years. Thank you. Appreciate that. Great hair.
People still ask me, they're like, what's your major? I'm like, girl, I tried to read 6 years ago.
What's your fuel?
I said some, but I don't know which one. You can look on the right photos.
Thank you. Okay, did you pull it over or sit in that? Read up on line view, I think 4 here though.
What's 3 minutes? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Patrick, why y'all breaking all that laws? I know that the girl in the press conference. Shame on y'all. Shame on y'all bringing all that noise in here. There you go. Charlie, come right here. Charlie.
That's the governor's people.
Mm-hmm. He's tall. Yeah, that's that camera right there. He can shoot over there.
I got it right here.
Charles about 7 foot tall.
Yeah, they're all the way up. And you said
They not gonna stand right there.
I'm there right here. Right here.
You don't want to stand next to me?
No, I'm coming. I'm getting Charles away from you. Come on. I'm standing by you.
I'm good right here.
I'm as far as I can go.
What you do, you learn how to make your camera tall. So, so once you said it, you could just move it. She come in, you come in, in the spot where you're supposed to.
Sorry.
Take it to the mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check. James, check your audio, James. You good? Good? Good, everybody good? Charles, you good? Charles,
Yep, I'm
you
good.
good? All right.
I'm good. Somebody, yeah, someone on the floor.
Okay.
James, you all, they never sent you to no basketball games yet.
All right. Okay, everybody ready? All right. Well, good afternoon. I first want to assure the public that the information that we're about to go over shows the great teamwork that is at play in this state to protect the public health. Here today with me is Solicitor General Ben Aguiaga, Surgeon General Ralph Abraham, and former Congressman Ralph Abraham, Dr. Pete Krogan, the Deputy Secretary. Who is not here is the hundreds of staff members and state employees that support both myself and all of those up here today that have been working tirelessly to ensure that this crisis is contained. Because of their hard work, we're in a good place. We have dodged a bullet this time. We have utilized the justice system to ensure that we can continue to protect the public. What we're dealing with is a form of a drug-resistant tuberculosis. And again, at this time, we have no indication that the public is in any danger. And of course, we have I think first it's important to talk about the TB program that we have, and Dr. Abraham and Dr. Pete can elaborate a little more about it. But the TB program in Louisiana started in 1958, and at the time, the state had over 1,200 cases of active tuberculosis. Now there are about 100 in 2023, which means that TB team and LDH is doing its job. The TB program has three purposes. It identifies and reports to the federal government. It treats and diagnoses cases of tuberculosis and prevents the spread of the disease, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today and what we're working on. And finally, the TB program conducts contact investigations where suspected exposure may have occurred, which is exactly what happened in this case. And so again, the information that we're putting out today is informative, and the public should not be concerned. Each region of the state has its own TB team that has its own TB chest clinic located within a parish health unit. So what did happen? Let's go through the timeline. Patient 0 started in China and moved somewhere between China and the United States where there was an illegal border crossing. And if you want details on that, you can go ask the federal government. But the fact of the matter is, patient 0 started in China and made its way through an illegal border crossing and ended up in the United States, where patient 0 was apprehended in California and then sent to a federal facility in Louisiana. From the federal facility, patient 0 was transported to a medical facility. At that medical facility, there was concern that the patient had active tuberculosis. Patient 0 was then released from the medical facility to DHS custody. From there, patient 0 was transported to another federal-run facility and ultimately ended up in another medical facility. A routine TB investigation then occurred. On September 17th, the ICE facility then notified LDH, thus triggering the TB investigation team. At some point, patient 0 was transferred to a medical facility. Since that time, we have been actively working to ensure that the proper healthcare protocols were in place to protect the public. Again, let me assure the public, since the time that the TB team has been investigating this, we have been actively working to ensure that the proper healthcare protocols were in place to protect the public. At some point, the ability of the state to properly protect the public required the intervention of the Attorney General. And I want to say something. The Attorney General's office was unbelievable throughout this entire process. They did an unbelievable job. And so before I turn it over to the Solicitor General who's representing the Attorney General's office for us today, I want to make a statement. While I was the Attorney General, I warned consistently that an open, porous border, an unchecked border, were allowing people to come into this country with diseases that this country's healthcare system has consistently worked to eradicate. We are consistently seeing, as you read through the headlines, y'all do the reporting, y'all see in your papers, additional cases of measles, mumps. Now we have a rare form of tuberculosis, which I'll let the Surgeon General elaborate on. But again, this is not something new. The public should understand. We have been saying this is the type of crisis that occurs when we let people come into this country unchecked. And so again, I want to thank the Attorney General and the Solicitor General. I want to turn it over to the Solicitor General for a few comments on the legal matters. Ben?
Well, thank you, Governor. Benjamin Aguinaga, Solicitor General, here on behalf of Attorney General Liz Murrill. On October 9th, the state received news that patient 0 had tested positive for this drug-resistant form of tuberculosis. And over the next 6 days, the Attorney General was intimately involved with the governor, with officials from the Department of Health, and other statewide officials in attempting to create an admission plan for eradicating and stopping the spread of this disease. The key date here for our purposes was on October 15th. On that date, the Attorney General hosted a call with ICE officials, and on that call, we demanded from ICE an assurance, a commitment not to release from these facilities any potentially infected detainees without medical clearance by the Department of Health. ICE refused on that call. ICE sent us another email the same day, again refusing to make that commitment. So as a result, on the same day, the governor and the Attorney General directed my office to prepare an emergency lawsuit to file against ICE in the Western District of Louisiana. We drafted and filed those pleadings on October 16th, the next day, in Lafayette, in the Western District. Critical here is that we filed that lawsuit under seal at the consent of our health officials and the governor, because the pleadings intimately involve patient 0's sensitive health identifying information. That's on October 16th. On October 17th, we got on the phone with the court, and the same day the court entered a temporary restraining order against ICE, basically barring ICE from releasing potentially infected detainees without court approval. That order remains in effect today. The next day, October 18th, the state our office moved to unseal those filings with appropriate redactions covering the identifying information of patient 0. Yesterday evening, on October 22nd, the district court did so. It lodged on the public record the filings that you have available today with appropriate redactions. As for next steps, the district court has ordered a preliminary injunction hearing that he will hold next week on Thursday in Lafayette. Until that hearing date, the temporary restraining order remains in effect. Thank you.
I would now like to bring up Surgeon General Ralph Abraham.
Good afternoon. I see before you, you have the document that we passed out about Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And I just want to hit the high points of it, that this is a bacterium that is contagious. This particular patient has a very resistant strain of tuberculosis. It is the only case in Louisiana. And to the governor's point, we normally do not see a case such as this except from a foreign country. TB, as a rule, is a slow-growing organism, contagious to a point, infectious certainly. But in Louisiana right now, going back to the governor's comment, we only have 79, quote, regular TB cases. That's how good our TB response team at LDH does. They find them, we treat them, and we get them over this. So saying that, with this particular patient, myself, Dr. Peake, Dr. Salsheet, everyone on our team, we know how to treat these patients. We know how to handle these patients, and we know how to prevent spread of this particular organism throughout the general population, and we've done that. This particular patient has been well treated, receiving the proper medications, and at this point, I'm told, as of today, patient 0 is fairly much asymptomatic, but still receiving medication. We're going to continue. We are getting some headwinds from DHS on certain asks and requests. We are working through that with the Attorney General's help with our temporary restraining order. We will continue to do that. Our priority, as always, at this level is protecting the public. We will continue to do that also. I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Dr. Peake.
Thanks. So just want to reiterate the governor's first point about the great work that this team's done to contain the risk of spread. And I'll want to share a little more about what went into that. Really, this is what public health is built to do. The governor mentioned the history of the TB program, but it also doesn't mean that it's easy work. Each case of exposure is complex and cognitively intense. We had dozens of staff working basically nonstop over the last several months to ensure there's no additional risk for the public. This involves being on the ground. It's really brute force disease investigative techniques. We go in, we identify persons, potential contacts that may be exposed to a person with infectious TB. We use interviews and standard disease investigative techniques. Then we make a clinical assessment. Is there possible transmission of tuberculosis? That involves symptoms, imaging of the chest, skin tests, blood tests, and microbiological respiratory tests known as sputums. Finally, if there is transmission, we provide appropriate treatment for TB and coordinate that throughout the process. Naturally, there are confidential components to any disease investigation that we won't be able to share. That's really to protect the confidentiality of the patients, especially when they're small numbers, and that's per state law. But behind the scenes, I do wish the folks in this room could see the tenacity and diligence of our public health team. It really has been a privilege to work alongside them, and want to publicly thank them for their service. With that, I will give it back to the governor.
Thank you. Before we open it up to any questions, I again want to ensure the public that what we're doing today is making sure that the public is informed. And I think that the information that we provided you just now shows how diligently and what great work the Department of Health has done to protect the public from TB. And the reason that this created such a potential crisis, it literally is a contained crisis at this point, is that we don't have, as Dr. Abraham said, such rare forms of tuberculosis coming in, not only to this country, but in this state as well. And that's what we want to prevent. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that our citizens are protected. And so with that, I will open it up to any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Police file with the advocate. So you said it's a contained crisis. So I'm just curious more about, is this contagious? Is there a risk of this particular strain spreading, or is that not the case anymore?
As long as our restraining orders are adhered to, there's no reason at all to be concerned about spread. This patient is in isolation. If patient 0 remains in isolation as we've requested, getting the treatment that patient 0 is getting, no, it's not going to spread.
And then how long will patient 0 need to be in isolation to ensure that?
It depends on the sputum, the follow-up test, so to speak. It varies from patient to patient, but it could be weeks. I got it. Mike, do you have a cold rag? Don't get up yet. You're fine. You just pass that. Happens all the time. Get your seat right first. It happened last week in another place I was at. I don't know why they passed out.
That's embarrassing.
It's okay. Not embarrassing.
During the press conference?
Yes.
That's okay. It happens all the time.
No, it's okay.
Don't drink the water, just sip it.
I'm good. I'm good. Y'all do what you need to do.
Keep your leg up for a minute. Just don't get up. Okay.
Y'all do what you need to do. I just ran this.
Well, the good news is that there were plenty of doctors in the room, right? All right, everybody's fine. We're just gonna keep going, Doc.
Okay, go ahead. Do you have about the, add to the question of exposure and spread and containment?
That's right. So contain any potential exposures at the facilities are also cohorted to prevent future risk of exposure. And then your question about the individual treatment course, as Doc said, it's really an individualized assessment based on their clinical response to the treatment. Could be as long as 6 months.
Yes, ma'am.
Governor, according to the lawsuit, the woman received an x-ray back in July and was suspected of TB and was allowed to go into general population through August. Why was she allowed to be around so many people when she was already suspected of having TB?
Yeah, well, I will let the medical experts answer that question.
We typically don't get into the facility level decisions, part of that confidentiality aspect that I was talking about. But we would not be in the situation if she didn't spread the risk of TB to potential patients. So in this case, I think we're learning more about the case each week, about the individual decisions that were made.
And is there a possibility that any of those people that came in contact could potentially have the contagion now?
At this point, there's no confirmed case of transmission, but that's what our team is working on to minimize that risk.
And let me just add to this, and either Dr. Abraham and Dr. Krogan can make sure that I stay within the medical guidelines. But again, the whole issue behind this is, as Dr. Abraham said, TB is a slow-growing bacteria, right? So it takes a while to ensure that those that may have come in contact that we work through the process so that you can clear them, which is one of the reasons we were trying to contain everyone in these detention facilities from being able to leave those detention facilities until we had cleared them. And that's what, again, that's a...
You're right, Governor. Governor is exactly right. Because this is such a slow-growing bacterium, it's not like something that 72 hours later, such as some viruses, you have symptoms. This can be a long time, weeks, months. The way we test for tuberculosis is either with a skin test, blood test, and then if those are positive, we go to chest x-ray. But if we get a negative test, and we know they've had exposure, we want to retest that patient before we as doctors say they're good to go. That's where we run into submissions.
Yes, sir.
So to be clear then, Dr. Abraham, people who might test negative now could test positive later on or some other day?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, Pat.
So how many potential exposures have there been, and the temporary restraining order, does it apply to the entire facility or just those who've been potentially exposed?
Okay.
Again, we typically don't reveal those numbers, and it's because we're trying to balance the transparency and confidentiality. There's two aspects to it. It's the state statute, and then also it's such a dynamic. It'll be different by tomorrow, and it'll be different by yesterday. That's because each of those individual exposures is its own case investigation. Your second part about the restraining order involves the entire facility.
We got time for about one more question.
Yeah, Jude.
I know it's not, I swear I don't have TB, I'm just getting over a cold. I know it's not commonly used in the U.S., but I do think there's a TB vaccine. Do you guys think about distributing that, and could you explain why or why not?
Okay.
There is a TB vaccine. It's not used in the United States. It does have some issues with it. And again, it's an individual country's, I guess, decision to do that. And this country has so far decided not to vaccinate.
Okay. All right, again, as information becomes public and we're able to put it out, we'll put that information out. The purpose of this press conference was to ensure that the public understood exactly what was going on, since the court filings were made public this morning. And so, again, we want to ensure the public that there is a huge team of people that are working 24/7 to ensure the health care of this state. And it's not only because of this particular incident, it's something that they're doing consistently. And so I want to, again, just personally thank each one of them that are out there working to help us, whether it is in this issue or any other public health care issue that we're dealing with. Thank you.